Good morning. Welcome to Sunday morning at First Unitarian Church. We're so glad that you're here. If you're visiting with us, you are our honored guest, and we're especially glad to see you. We'd love it if you stay for coffee and conversation after service. Welcome to those joining online as well. We've got coffee hour for you. You got to bring your own coffee, but we'd love to talk to you and get to know you better. Let's start with a few announcements before we begin. We are looking for volunteers for Pride to help us out with the festival booth and to help us carry the giant flag at the end of the parade on Sunday. If you would like to be of service, there's a form that you can fill out in this week's Torch email. You can also find it on our website. Or if all else fails, come talk to me and I will hook you up. We're going to have a volunteer meeting this Thursday afternoon at 5:30 on Zoom. If you can't make it to the meeting, please do try. But if you can't, you can still volunteer. So please take care of that this week. We'd love to have you on board. Related to Pride, usually during Pride Week, we participate in the interfaith worship service. It's on Wednesday or Thursday during that week. And they're putting together the interfaith choir for the Pride service. So if you would like to sing in that choir, please let me know, and I will connect you to the right people. Now, let's talk through a few dates before the end of the year. On May 21st, after the 11 o'clock service, is our congregational meeting. We'll take a look at the budget. We will elect our new trustees to the board, and we'll hear from the endowment committee. Lots of fun things like that, and don't you want to be involved? So come on the 21st. This is when we do the business of our congregation, so it's really important, and we'd love to see you there. There will be an online budget Q&A session on May 17th. That's a Thursday evening, and it'll happen at 7 o'clock. You can find the link for that where? In the Torch, yes, or online. Then May 28th, that's Memorial Day weekend. We will go to one service at 10 o'clock. The following Sunday is June 4th. That's Pride weekend, and we'll have one service here at 9:30. That's so everybody can get down to the parade. And then finally, on June 11th, that'll be the last official worship service of the church year. That's Reverend Ian's last Sunday with us. So we really want everybody to be here. It's going to be a big day, and we got a lot planned. So June 11th, make sure that you're here for that. Welcome to our lay minister this morning, Kristen Quinn. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say. And now we'll begin our worship service with the lighting of the chalice. Today I bring you these words by the great Rabbi Abraham Heschel. Our goal should be to live life in radical amazement. Get up in the morning and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted. Everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. To be spiritual is to be amazed. Do it the old-fashioned way. I invite you now to rise with me in body or in spirit, and let's sing together number 153.
I went to a birthday party in April. I didn't know what the party would look like. Certainly a celebration of a life well lived, a life that is currently being ravaged by stage 4 pancreatic cancer, a life that is transforming yet again. When we as a group of friends celebrated James last year, we had no idea what the year would bring. In April of 2022, we set aside the morning of a busy conference in Las Vegas to meet for breakfast, to celebrate James. We brought him a sash and a crown that he proceeded to wear for the remainder of the day. We were at a scientific conference full of seriousness. James brought the joy. He brings the joy everywhere. His laugh can carry across a crowded room, echoes against canyon walls on river trips, and follows him down mountains while skiing. He's a builder of people, of relationships, of healing. Surviving childhood trauma, addiction and recovery, and learning to live with HIV made him seem invincible to me. Never one to shy away from hard conversations, always leaning into a friend's pain, and never afraid to voice his opinion made him seem larger than life. He was generous with his advice, too. For example, during dinner one night, he looked at my son and with a seriousness usually set aside for matters of gravity, said, "Make sure to trim your nose hairs before kissing someone. No one wants to be tickled when kissing." My son was 14 at the time. No 14-year-olds have nose hair. So a party was carefully planned for the good days between chemo in California, where he is currently living and getting treatment. About 70 attendees came from across the country, and one even flew in from France. 10 of us, including James, crowded into a small rental house for the weekend. It felt like we were all 25 again, despite the fact that the age range of the 10 of us was 30 to 76. Did I mention that we shared one bathroom? The actual party was at the home of a friend, but the community we all needed was in that house. My husband says being around this group of friends is like witnessing all the caregivers trying to take care of each other, to fill each other up. We found a version of James that we'd all been steeling ourselves for, but not quite ready for. His once athletic body is shrinking, his hair has disappeared, his voice is often rough and quiet, his stomach needs to have 7 to 10 pounds of fluid drained weekly. We watched it grow in front of us. His boundless energy seems to have found its match. But he is steering the narrative. He is still himself. He is making decisions about where he wants to be, who he wants with him, and what treatments he is open to. He is driving what information gets out, taking the time to address the very large group of people who love him on his terms, acknowledging that his circle has ripples. I noticed that we were all watching James and then watching each other. Did anyone else notice that he's having a hard time finding words? Did anyone else notice he fell asleep while talking? How many visiting nurses does it take to keep track of his medication schedule? It's like we were collectively steeling ourselves for goodbye while also desperately searching for signs of hope. Signs that he would be the one to beat the odds. I have to say, a room full of medical and mental health professionals, we err on the pragmatic side, and yet we hoped. In private conversations, we spoke about our feelings of guilt for these conflicting emotions. Were we betraying him by questioning his or anyone's ability to fight this disease? Shouldn't we just join him in his conviction that he might be the one to beat the odds? What kind of friends held on to both realities with equal grips? I felt a bit ashamed that I couldn't just wholly jump on the hope bus. But the reality is that balancing hope with the information we'd been given seemed to keep us all grounded. At the party, James somehow found his voice, the one we all recognized. He called 70 people, family and friends, to attention. He thanked us for being there and recognized that it had been difficult for him to reach out personally to each person who had reached out to him. He asked us all to put our hands on our hearts and said, I've been practicing for this moment with my palliative care provider. If we can all breathe in and out together, holding our hands on our hearts, we can feel connected to our own hearts and to each other. We can celebrate this moment. We can celebrate our love for one another. We can sit in the power of this community of people and celebrate what we've built. As he led us all through our breaths, the once bustling room was quiet. For me, the guilt and shame I'd felt about preparing for James's death went away. And so did the forced hope that he would be the one to beat the disease. It just didn't seem as important as simply celebrating the moment we were in, recognizing that each moment we are with the people we care about is enough and reason to celebrate. As he ended our meditation, he reminded us that we have all now connected in a way that can be carried on as long as needed. And he reminded us to celebrate the small things, to stay in and appreciate each moment, and to celebrate the life we are living. Unbeknownst to James, he gave us a very Unitarian Universalist gift, the gift of our seventh principle, the one that reminds us of the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. In that spirit, I would like for us to all put our hands on our hearts. And if we can breathe in and out together, we can sit in the power of this community of people and celebrate what we've built. Thank you.
Often on these intergenerational Sundays, we talk about how the children and youth of our community are the future of Unitarian Universalism. But actually, they are the present as well, right? They are people in their own right who need what adults have to offer them, what you have to offer them. Not just the adults that they live with, but the adults in their community. And I think that we adults also need what these kids have to teach us. To me, that's the real meaning of intergenerational community, is that we are teaching each other across these boundaries of age and all the other boundaries that are illusions that divide us. Now is the time when we accept our offering from this community, and we're very grateful for it because it supports this kind of intergenerational learning that is so rare in our community. Where else can you go and learn from people this age? Where else can they go and learn from you? So please give generously as you think about that and enjoy the music.
This morning, we have a story to share with you. All those who are willing and able, especially if you are a small human, are invited to come sit up here. And if you are an adult with a small person that you think needs more help, come sit up here too. We have adapted this morning's story from the book, Why the World Doesn't End by Michael Meade. It's a South American folktale titled The Tree of Life. At first, things simply became warmer, causing ice caps to melt and parts of the earth to turn into deserts. Eventually, everything became overheated, and the atmosphere went on to fire. Soon, the great fire spread throughout the world, and nothing anyone could do was able to stop it. The intensity of the flames reduced the singing green forest to cinders, and even the mountains were melted down. The fire burned until all that remained was a mass of ashes. The fire consumed everything alive at the time, leaving nothing standing or moving on earth. There was just one thing that remained. There is always one thing that manages to be included, even when it seems like everything has been consumed.
It happened that two beings, Ikanchu and Chuna, had been visiting the other world when the great fire reduced this world to ashes. The two companions had gone to the other world, and they were shocked when they returned to see that all that was left of the earth was an endless sea of ash, While looking out on the devastation left by the fire, they felt a great sense of homelessness. More than anything, they desired to return to their homeland, but everywhere they looked the same.
Suddenly, the trickster appeared before them and instructed them on how to find their home. They were instructed to point their index fingers straight ahead while flying over the ash that covered the face of the earth. If their fingers began to tremble and then turn down of their own accord, they would be pointing to their home.
The old people believed that all humans were naturally that way, able to live in two worlds, and that maybe they were even required to do so at certain times. That was back in the time when animals were revered, having additional powers, such as sensing danger or a storm coming, or having the ability to fly. Having been in the other world during the fire, Ikanchu and Chuna were spared being incinerated. They were also spared having to witness this great loss of life. Now, they flew silently over the endless devastation.
As they flew, they extended their index finger before them. They trusted the knowledge given to them by the trickster, for they knew that tricksters have to do with the magic of creation, as well as the tricks of destruction. Perhaps another trick remained in the mind of creation that could heal the earth and start things growing again.
As they traveled over the endless wasteland of ash, their index fingers began to point toward the earth. Soon, both fingers were pointing firmly straight down. Although the pile of ash below looked like every other place they had seen, the two travelers followed their fingers down right into the ash. They felt that they might be near their old home, yet only ashes remained of all that they had known before. They were in the aftermath of creation, adrift in the ashes of existence.
Soon after they touched the face of the earth, the two beings began to feel quite hungry. Instinctively, they began to dig through the ashes for food. After sorting through the piles of ash, Ikanchu only managed to unearth a single chunk of burnt wood. Ikanchu felt a deep longing for the trees. Once upon a time, their home had been strong, with many species of trees standing up in the light. Ikanchu imagined that the piece of charcoal must be the remainder of one of those tall trees that had once made their home a beautiful place. Suddenly, the thought struck him that the drums were also the remains of trees. The people used to make drums from trees and use them for dances and ceremonies. Without thinking about it, Ikanchu began to play that burnt-out, leftover piece of wood as if it were a genuine drum.
Soon enough, Ikanchu became infected by his own rhythm and began to dance. As long as he was dancing, he thought, he might as well sing. There was nothing to eat and nothing else to do. Besides, dancing and playing gave him a small sense of courage. In the midst of the ashes of creation, Ikanchu began to sing and dance as he played his charcoal drum. He danced and played all day, while Chuna observed everything and seemed to meditate on the proceedings. At the end of the day, Ikanchu became quite tired. There being nothing else to do, he simply lay down and fell into a deep sleep right in the ashes at the end of the day.
When the light of dawn came and chased the darkness from the world, Ikanchu thought of his little drum and went to look for the piece of charcoal that had been the instrument for his dancing and singing. He was surprised to see a tender green shoot coming out of his charcoal drum. Inspired by the greenness of the new tendril that stood out against the endless expanse of ash, Ikanchu began to sing again. He danced with abandon around that shoot and sang with all his heart.
As Ikanchu continued to sing and dance, the tendril of life grew steadily and began to look like a slender tree. In no time at all, the trunk thickened and stood straight up, and soon put forth long branches that reached out in all four directions. There it stood in the midst of the expanse of ash, the only expression of life, the only tree on the face of the earth.
Ikanchu intensified his dancing all the more when he saw that his song had awakened the life of the tree, which had grown from that little stem that had sprouted out of the charcoal from the ashes of the fire that had consumed most of the world. While dancing wildly around the tree, Ikanchu's foot struck a stone buried in the sea of ashes. He picked up the rock and, without thinking, suddenly threw it at the tree. It is hard to explain, but when the dancer found another stone, he threw it at the tree as well.
After singing devotedly to the tree, dancing all around it, and taking great delight in the spreading of the branches, Ikanchu began to chuck rocks at it from all directions. You might call it instinct or foolishness, or another one of those mistakes that happens in the vicinity of important trees. Perhaps the instinct of destruction is so closely tied to the creative impulse that when one returns to the world, the other has to become manifest as well. Creation and destruction can be seen as twin forces that are secretly connected, like beginning and ending. Ikanchu kept firing rocks at the firstborn tree. He tossed the stones with the same enthusiasm and abandon that he had devoted to dancing and singing to the tree. Throughout all of this, Chuna sat in silence, seeming to observe and witness everything that had transpired.
Each time Ikanchu threw a stone, it would hit a branch. And each time a branch was struck, it would break off from the tree and fall into the ash-covered earth. The strange thing was that each broken branch immediately took root in those ashes. Wherever they happened to fall, the branches would immediately begin to grow and soon multiply, so that each branch quickly became another tree. Not only that, but each branch gave rise to a different species of tree, and soon enough, a properly diversified forest began to spread out and grow where there had been nothing but ash before. There were countless species of trees and full-blown forests greenly growing and wildly lifting their branches up while sending their roots deep into the earth at the same time. It was as if the trees were dancing in the ashes of the aftermath of the great fire. After the return of the forests, the animals began to appear, and eventually people came back to the world again. Creation and destruction, singing and dancing, what was and what will be. The roots of creativity and joy exist in each soul who enter this dance of life.
In this time of year, all I want to do is walk outdoors and experience the beauty of the world. Spring is my favorite time of year, never mind the allergies, because Mother Nature shows out. And I soak up more color and fragrance than I can actually hold. I want to let myself become swollen with it in the hopes of saving some for the dry, dreary days of summer and stocking it away in my memory like a squirrel to sustain me through the winter. I like to buy a new pair of shoes to pack on the miles, some sunscreen, maybe a nice new hat, and then hit the street. And right now, everybody's gardening, and I live vicariously through everyone else's gardens. I'm an apartment dweller, so I don't have one of my own, and I've been languishing on some community garden waiting list for a long time. Walking around enjoying everyone else's gardens and hitting up the farmer's market in the summer is less work and probably less money too. I've been reading a book of essays by the poet Ross Gay, who writes about the way he has gardened every inch of the half-acre around his home, shopping the online seed catalogs and buying up way more than he can plant, especially considering that everyone in his neighborhood is going to stop by his house with a few plants or seeds or sprouts, and they've brought along their trowel and a handful of paper towels so they can take home whatever he uproots from his own plot to make room for their gifts. The garden is a repository of sharing, he says. It's the kind of small-scale social democracy that we all long for, to know our neighbors and to share with them. Gay anticipates our next question. Yeah, but isn't gardening a privilege? We ask it because we know that gardening requires money and leisure time and space that one owns and can do what one wants with, and fresh air and safety. Isn't gardening a privilege? We also ask this because we know that gardening brings joy. The deep, wide joy of putting one's hands into the earth and claiming one's birthright, of eating things you grew yourself, and yes, of building this community of sharing that seems almost unimaginable sometimes when we've run ourselves weary on the treadmill of capitalism. We know that gardening brings joy, and we've come to be suspicious of joy, as if joy itself is a privilege and therefore somehow morally tainted. In a world as broken as this one, who do we think we are, feeling joy? What right do we think we have? Great point, Gay says, and goes on. I want to be cautious of the ways we sometimes consider, for instance, gardening, or health care, or potable water, or clean air, or pleasant and stable housing, or decent jobs, or good schools, or libraries, or living relatives, or being unabused, or having free time, or not being imprisoned, or not living near a power plant, or an incinerator, or a landfill, or 1,000,000 acres of corn, or soybeans sprayed with toxins. A privilege, which actually obscures the fact that to be without these things is violence. It is abnormal, even if it is the norm, and it is an imposition of precarity that is not natural. It is not simply an affliction, but an infliction, and the withholding from some of the means of life, of which means there are plenty to go around, is a disprivilege, which is to say, life, though it is a gift, is not a privilege. We do not need to feel guilty about feeling joyful, about pursuing joy. We were made for joy. Or, if you prefer less poetic language, animals like us evolve in the direction of pleasure and ease. It is our natural state. We do need to be suspicious of why everyone can't access their birthright, why some feel that they are entitled to much more than their share, why some cannot be satisfied with their portion, and the spiritual emptiness that comes from that kind of hollow consuming, how a lack of awareness about that is causing everything to be burned up. When I lived in Birmingham, I had the great privilege of meeting the Reverend Dr. William Barber, the founder of the Moral Mondays movement, who came to our city several times to teach us how to do social justice work in the spirit of the civil rights movement. Reverend Barber had this sermon that he would preach often about the first sermon of Jesus. Reverend Barber taught that Jesus was the original community organizer. When Jesus preached the first sermon of his ministry, he took as his text a passage of Hebrew scripture from the 61st chapter of what we now call the book of Isaiah. Listen to it. "The Spirit of God is upon me to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and release to the prisoners, to comfort all who mourn, to give them a garland instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the mantle of praise instead of a faint spirit. They shall build up the ancient ruins. They shall raise up the former devastations. They shall repair the ruined cities, the devastations of many generations." Even thousands of years ago, the ancient authors of this text knew that restoring the people came through good news, care and comfort, liberty and release, gladness, praise, repair. When justice comes, it will look like being dressed in flowers, wearing fine garment and perfume. It will look new and beautiful. This text was actually the entire scope of Jesus' first sermon. The story tells us that he read those words and he sat back down. He did not need to elaborate. He'd said all that needed to be said. The work of social justice is not fighting what we hate. It's restoring people to their natural state of joy and restoring the world to a realm of celebration. That's how Reverend Barber was able to build a multicultural, multi-religious movement of thousands, representing a panorama of religious faiths, even as a Christian pastor telling stories about Jesus, because the premise is a resonant truth that crosses racial, ethnic, and religious boundaries. We must ground our work for social justice in the practice of joy. And that's why Reverend Barber insisted that when we do community organizing, we always put someone in charge of songs. Every movement needs a bard, one whose sole responsibility is to keep music in our hearts so that we move to the beat of joy. In the story that Amanda and I shared with you, Chuna and Ikanchu return from the other world to ruins and devastations, an expanse of waste so vast that they can't find their way home. When they do get some direction, their home is unrecognizable. Ikanchu sets to work, drumming life back into life, And as long as he's drumming, he might as well dance. And as long as he's dancing, he might as well sing. From the charcoal of his despair, he's able to fashion a drum. And from that drum, he's able to draw forth the rhythm of joy. Isn't that how it always goes? Even in our saddest moments, just as Kristen was telling us, when we feel the world is damaged beyond repair, the rhythms of joy conspire to restore us to ourselves. Someone laughs during the funeral. It's usually me. Someone brings food to a friend who's suffering. The sun shines at all times behind the clouds. We need times of lamentation when we can let ourselves fully feel the weight of the sorrows of the world. We need times when we can cry and process our pain, both together and alone. But the inherent joy of the world rumbles us back to life. The great Rabbi Abraham Heschel wrote, "People of our time are losing the power of celebration. Celebration is an active state, an act of expressing reverence or appreciation. To be entertained is a passive state. It is to receive pleasure afforded by an amusing act or a spectacle. But celebration is a confrontation, giving attention to the transcendent meaning of one's actions." I love that. Celebration as an act of confrontation, as defiance against a world where cruelty often seems to be the point. We blossom when we choose it, when we put on a new pair of shoes and hit the sidewalk, seeking out joy, soaking it up, finding ways to restore joy to those from whom it has been stolen. We have so much to celebrate as a community this year. We've grown in membership, in pledging, in volunteerism. We've grown closer as a community, and we've grown deeper in our understanding of Unitarian Universalism. We've come to know what covenant really means for us. The promises we have made to each other feel more real. We have a greater sense of accountability to each other. We can easily look outside at the world and despair, for there are so many days where everything seems to be in ashes. Even today, we reel from the headlines of last night, another incident in Texas. When will it end? But from the garden of community that we've cultivated here, we have something to share with this burned and broken world. A garland of comfort, the oil of gladness, a mantle of praise. May we be all this and more for a world that needs this message so much. Amen. Will you join me once more in singing? Our closing hymn is number 1052. Please be seated. We close once again with the words of Rabbi Heschel, who offers this prayer. Dear God, grant me the grace of wonder. Surprise me, amaze me, awe me in every crevice of your universe. Each day enrapture me with your marvelous things without number. I do not ask to see the reason for it all. I ask only to share the wonder of it all. Junior singers, you guys are awesome. Thank you for your gifts. I wish you an hour of playing outside and a very small piece of candy and a nice nap. Yes, thank you, Mr. David. Thank you, Miss Nikki. Thank you, Miss Amanda. Thank you, Tristan. Thank you, volunteers, and thank each one of you for making time to be here with your community. Have a great week.